Oh, we have a new item, daily item reporter here, Zach Laird.
Oh, he does a good job with his writing.
Oh, good.
He does.
Yeah.
Because I read the item, I subscribe and I read the item, the latest.
Cat, as I did this morning, and I'm thinking, I just want to fucking leave this joint. You want to eat some stuff?
I'm gonna get you soda.
Uh,
Alfred Trombetto, you are live on the link here, so you're aware.
Somebody named Alfred Trombetto.
Was it you?
Other life.
Oh my.
Heard about you.
Yes.
You know what keeps you praised?
I think it was probably I had the one, everybody was in this area at the same time from Ohio and the South.
You are unmuted.
Hello, everybody, welcome. Let's call this meeting to order at 7:04 PM.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag,
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has everybody? Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes from our last meeting dated December 10th?
Yes,
Are there any changes or questions regarding those minutes?
no,
Could I then have a motion to approve?
motion to approve the school committee meeting minutes of December 10th, 2024.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on to the acknowledgement and visit boards.
Well, Madam Chair, this evening you have Zach Laird from the Daily Item, Alfred Trombetto Jr., as well as your colleague Mariana Raworth, Greg Pianessa, Nancy Caggiano, and one other, and Kayla Harrington, teacher at the Johnson School.
Hello, everyone, and welcome.
In addition, we have Mr. Tony Barletta, Town Administrator.
Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to change the order of the agenda. And we're going to dive right into budgets.
Okay, folks, I'm gonna present two versions. And then we have the town administrator, Tony Barletta, with us tonight to speak a little bit about the general financial state of the town going into budget season after we presented these two versions, because you asked at the last meeting that I come back with a second version that included an additional position, one of a math and English language arts specialist. So version 2 has that included, version 1 doesn't. And the framework of the budget presentation, those online are gonna have to, I think, hear this verbally, but I can certainly get copies of this to anyone that would need that otherwise, unless Kevin, you happen to have it on your machine and can share it. I'm not sure it's terribly important. The PowerPoint is built the same way the previous superintendent, Toby Parentazzi, presented to various committees along the way, including Finance Committee, all the way up to budget season. And this is in preparation for February 11th, which is the night of our public budget hearing, which is at one of our regular school committee meetings. So if you get by page 1, just lists the school committee members on page 2. Page 3 outlines the major changes in version 1 from the fiscal 2025 year. This version shows a total increase of $246,208. That is a 5.19 increase over last year's approved budget amount. Last year, the approved amount was $190,000 over the previous year. The year before that was $195,000 before that year. So the previous 2 years, this being a projected and proposed 5.19%, was 4.2% last year and 4.5% the year before that. The Johnson School section of the budget in version 1 is an increase of $20,103. The district portion of the budget is an increase of $191,159. And the town section of the budget is an increase of, rounded off to $35,000. The factors that affect the increase, significant cost increases for special education tuition and transportation. Due to additional placements and change in placements, there's an increase of 9 out-of-district students to 12 out-of-district students this school year, and we're projecting that that would continue into next school year. Salary increases for the collective bargaining agreement for Unit A teachers is for next year at 3.25%. Unit B, which is the paraprofessionals, is just starting, so there is a estimate in the budget, but not a set negotiated percent. There is one less teacher in this budget, and that is for grade 5, because that present 4th grade 2 teaching positions was not filled. So this projects 1 teacher for grade 5. There is an additional paraprofessional in here, and that was basically a result dovetailing off of the decrease of the teacher and increased special ed needs. We added an additional ESP. The school counselor, who is presently full-time, is kept in this budget at full-time, but a portion of her salary in previous years was funded through the ESSER grant monies, and that grant money is now gone. So in order to keep a full-time counselor, which is important, the budget has to absorb the loss of the grant funding and show an increase. Swampscott tuition is set, and it includes the 6th grade payment, which you funded over 2 or 3 years. You didn't do it all in one fell swoop, and that shows a 2.5% increase. And that contract runs through 2027 with Swampscott for your kids to attend high school. The tuition amount for Essex North Shore Aggie Tech Center is set at 3%. We don't know what the number is yet. It relates to the number of students that are attending this year for next year's budget. And that is a little less, but we don't know what their total budget increase will be. It's a lot better than having additional students in terms of the budget window of time. So that's a quick overview of the major changes. Next page. And yours may go front back. In terms of the budget itself, the increased cost for the additional ESPs is $40,214. The Swampscott tuition increase, including the charge for 6th grade, which went over there in 23-24, is $42,741. And then the one to highlight, the big driver and a necessary, needed, deserved, and mandatory driver, are the increases in district tuitions and transportation increases for out-of-district special ed placements. This shows a budget increase of $170,647. That's 70% of the overall budget increase is tuitions and transportation. But it's important to note that that 170 includes applying 150,000 of circuit breaker money to reduce what would have been an increase of 218 and 102 would have been $320,000 increase. So by applying circuit breaker, we're able to lower that number down, but it's still a very, very high number. If we had not had circuit breaker to apply, the number for tuition and transportation would have been more than what the total budget increase is. So that is not an unique situation. It happens in various towns around the Commonwealth at different times. Special ed placements are very costly. Can't go into any particular details, but if a child goes from one program to another, in just the move to meet their individual education plan needs, can be $100,000 swing in just the change of placement, let alone what the transportation might be if they have to go further or to a different geographical location. So those are numbers you just have to deal with. Circuit breaker is supposed to help with that,
What night though?
that it will do that.
Probably not Friday or Saturday night.
We're going tomorrow night.
Oh, we're gonna get.
So you're going tomorrow?
night.
Okay, so that, end of that slide, the total budget to budget increase is 246,208, 5.19. In terms of circuit breaker for notes, we had 65,000 in balance from circuit breaker left over that had to be spent this school year. That's going to be applied to overages in this year that are projected into next year. We received $157,810 in circuit breaker based on kids from last year that we either have to spend this year or next year. That's where the 150 is coming from, to be able to lower the 320 down to 170 above. And then I'm predicting, based on the kids that are in placements this year, that circuit breaker next year should be, if fully funded as promised, be about 189,000. So we'll have dedicated most of what we've got this year on hand to lower next year's projection and exposure, and then any unknowns or extra costs, or the next year when increases slide over, the 189 projected circuit breaker is going to have to apply to that. So those are just some notes I wanted you to be able to keep in the back of your mind as to what circuit breaker is. Next page shows the Johnson Education School budget change that on that first page says was an increase of 20,000. It is driven by the following items: regular full-time employee salary increases. 3.25 was the settlement for next year for Unit A, Unit B to be determined. Again, reduction 1 5th grade teacher, increase in ESPs, and the school counselor increase. I have a number to give you if you want to write it on your sheet, is $18,500. So to keep your counselor at full time costs $18,500. You get no additional time, but you backfill in what was covered by the grant. So that's Johnson Elementary School. Next one is the district. Tuition for junior, senior high school, 42,000 again. Superintendent's office is 4,000 increase, 1.67 of the total budget increase. School committee is 1996, less than 1% of the increase. Out of district tuitions and North Shore Consortium that we're a member of, not the transportation included, is the 142,308, which would have been 218 without half the circuit breaker amount of 150 applied there. So we're applying 75,000 to that particular line, which reduces the 218 to the 142. Total district change then is 191,159. That's basically 40% of the total increase is in the district budget. Town changes, out of district transportation, $27,000 increase. Remember, that's actually 102, but you strip out the 75, half the 150, and that becomes 10% of the increase. Total town change, roughly 35,000, which is 14.19% of the budget. The next page just shows you a summary of what we just presented by percents and overall, with the bottom line being a proposed budget of $4,988,540, of $246,000 increase, which is 56,000 more than last year's 190, for a 5.19% increase instead of a 4.2% increase. And then the last page goes back to 23, 24, 25, and lays out the same scenario. And that's the way Tony used to present to various committees. The next section is the detail. And it's in the way Allison collects it. It's line by line, item by item. And all those things we've talked about show up in the appropriate location. So I'd take any questions regarding version 1, which does not include the additional position. If there are any questions. We can come back to it. Version 2 looks exactly the same. It just changes the numbers. The bottom line is basically on page 3. At the very bottom, if you added the math ELL interventionist, which remember is a educator who is a specialist that helps kids that are not special education, don't have IEPs, but struggle in the important curricular areas of math and English language arts, both reading and writing skills, the foundation of all education, alongside teachers, pulls out teachers, works with kids in groups, and that is estimated at a master's degree, step 4, for $70,150, which also would not include, and I'm sure Tony would make a point of this, any insurance that the person would carry would be on the town side. So the bottom line of version 2 is, instead of the 246, the increase would be 316,358, would be 126,201 instead of the 56,000 more than last year. It would be an overall increase in the budget of 8.8 PowerPoint. Sure I get it right. 8.67% instead of that 5.19%. And again, it would ask the town for $316,358 more than last year. And in a second, I'm going to pass the baton to Tony and have him be able to articulate what his world is up against and how a request of 246 or 316 relates to resources that are available, as well as needs of other departments. Any clarifying question on either of those before I allow Tony to share with us? I want to thank him for being here.
Thank
He
you.
could have gone home at 3 o'clock, and he felt it was important to come here and in person, not join on Zoom, and I respect that very much. So, Tony?
Sure, thank you. I'll just pass out a couple. Documents there. Well, yeah, so first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. Always love coming to the school. It's always a trip down memory lane, walking through the halls. You know, I think that, you know, the relationship between the town and the school is healthy. It has been healthy for some time. We want it to remain that way, you know, feel strongly that, you know, what's good for the school is good for the town. So, you know, I'm here to present, I guess, some of the, you know, the financial constraints that we're faced with this year, but don't mistake in that with like lack of support in any way. We met, you know, as a smaller group to go over budget as Allison and I, our finance director, do on an annual basis. We meet with all department heads and go through their budgets, and, you know, the message I you know, are giving you tonight is the same message I'm, you know, speaking with all departments. I also want to commend you and thank you for the successful negotiation of the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers. I think that it's excellent. It's very important. I think it shows, you know, the staff, your teachers, and the town, you know, the support that we have and the appreciation we have for the talented staff here. And that message is something that, you know, goes beyond even the school. You know, one of the challenging things about Nahant is our ability to compete with, you know, municipal jobs, you know, from Nahant to other towns. And we're lucky and blessed to have like incredible talent here. And, you know, our goal is to try to like find ways to encourage that talent to stick around. You know, so when you're looking at budget constraints generally and, you know, your funding ability to do things in the future, you know, sometimes, you know, the first place to look is at salaries, because it's the biggest salaries and benefits, it's the biggest chunk of your budget overall. But, you know, I feel strongly that we shouldn't, you know, just jump for the lowest hanging fruit and try to like attack our problems that way, because it has the negative effect of, you know, not being able to try to reach those goals of keeping staff here and rewarding them for the work that they do. You know, every department across the board is minimally staffed. And, you know, like when you compare a lot of those roles and responsibilities to other towns, we're below market rate. So we have really talented staff, doing more with less and really like, you know, getting paid less than what other communities have the ability to offer. And we want to try and change that. So when we look at the budget overall and the constraints that we have, I want to try and find alternative ways to try to, you know, develop a balanced budget without, you know, going right to salaries and FTE counts and things like that. But it makes the task that much harder, because the other half of the equation is, mostly every department's operational budget is minimally funded too. You know, so when we look through the school budget, look through fire, police, DPW, library, you know, all town hall budgets, and you try and find little ways to reduce expenses, there really isn't, you know, a ton there. There's not a lot of fat in our budget. So, you know, we're stuck in between a lot of different challenges, and, you know, we just try to find ways to deliver a balanced budget to the town. The numbers that I'm showing you on this sheet are, you know, some of them are estimates at this point, like similar to Essex Aggie tuition. You know, you can put an estimated number on there to be safe, but you won't get the real number until later in the process. So things may become easier, they may become harder. You know, it depends what those numbers end up being. But our budget, when I speak about town budget, I try to explain it that you have basically two buckets of funds. You have your unrestricted revenues in one bucket that you use to pay your operational expenses. And then you have free cash, which is an unknown amount that varies every single year. And through the finance committee, the board of selectmen and myself and our finance director, we've prioritized, you know, having that free cash money be spent on one-time capital expenses, paying down debt, building up our reserve accounts, not getting into the habit of using free cash to pay for operational expenses, because if that number decreases in the future, it's kind of similar to the counselor position that you're talking about, where you have a grant that's funding a position and then that grant dries up, but you still have the position, and now that becomes a burden on your operational budget. So when we're looking at the unrestricted revenues, basically, it's not 100%, but it's almost entirely comprised of real estate revenue, real estate taxes, which because of Proposition 2.5, can only increase a little amount each year. And we are at this year compared to last year, our unrestricted revenues are around $360,000 more than last year. Now that has an estimate in there on state aid. We still haven't seen the governor's budget yet, and obviously that can change throughout the legislative process. But we feel, you know, a safe estimate for our unrestricted revenues increased from last year to next year is around $360,000. If you go to the second page here, there's a little bit of a look back. On the left side is the unrestricted revenues story. We had, dating back to fiscal year 23, our total brought in was 13.6 million. It increased about 300,000 to FY 24 to 13.9. Again, another about 300,000 from FY 24 to FY 25 to 14.2, to then this year estimated as 14.6. On the right side is requested expenses. And actually, if you go back to the front page there, based on what we received from the first round of requests that we got from every department, and including, and just on the operational side, the request totaled 15.7 million. So we have, you know, there's a significant gap there of what we have to spend on operational expenses and what's being requested. And in that is your first budget, not your second budget. And, you know, a lot of those costs are associated to uncontrollable increases, like special education, tuition, transportation, insurances and benefits. We've seen a large jump in that. We're still waiting on our true insurance increase number. But retirees this past January 1st kicked in a 20% increase on retirees insurance. So we don't expect that much of an increase on full-time employees, but it's an indication that, you know, health insurance is going up. So hopefully we'll probably get a good number on that February into March. When we look at you know, all collective bargaining increases for non-contract salaries, we've requested folks to put in a modest 2.5% increase. And we put that in, if we just level funded operating budgets, the increase in expenses from last year to this year is around $107,000. But then when you add in insurance, benefits, school tuition, transportation, that number goes up to $870,000. Now that number, to be fair, I think is before the circuit breaker adjustment that you put into your budget. But we're still looking at probably around a $500,000 gap from the first round of requested operating expenses to the first round of estimated operating revenues. So we have a lot of work to do on our end to try to find ways to bridge that gap. On the free cash side, which is the last column here, this year's estimated free cash amount is right around $800,000. That's probably right where we should be on an annual basis based on our budget. to remind, so free cash is, technically what it is it is the last budget, the last fiscal year that closed out. So we're in fiscal year 25, so fiscal year 24 that ended in June last year. At the end of that budget cycle, and doing, reconciliation, you look at how much, what you brought in for revenue, the actual number of revenue. If you brought in more than you estimated, that amount more would fall to free cash. And you look at your expenditures. If you spent less than what you appropriated, that amount less would fall to free cash. So those two numbers combine. And we are using that information to plan next year's fiscal year, right? So it's actually, it's a year behind, if you think about it that way. The previous years, we enjoyed a very high amount of free cash because of COVID. COVID funds really offset a lot of costs, different other types of unexpected revenues that came in. So we actually, last year we had $1.7 million in free cash. This year we're down to 800. So it's a big difference compared to last year, but truly last year was an anomaly of an extra amount of free cash. That being said, the requests that have come in for capital, for free cash uses exceeds that at $945,000. And that doesn't include what we usually try to use some free cash to put into those special, stabilization account, reserves, pay down debt. So really that number is even larger. The gap is actually bigger if you're gonna prioritize those things again. So all in all, if you look back at the budget, the two budget versions that Rob just spoke about, if our $363,000 estimate of new revenue compared to the year before is accurate, let's call it an accurate number for now. Even your first budget of $246,000 takes up a large amount of that. It only leaves the town, about $100,000 to handle all the other needs across the town, the insurances and other collective bargaining agreements and operating expenses, other contractual obligations. So it is very, very tight. Obviously, we, agree with the need to maintain the counselor position. That does reflect an added FTE burden of cost in the first budget. But we want to try to, at least be able to, fund you guys to a point where, or develop a balanced budget that includes funding that you guys are able to maintain that position as well. On the second budget, as I mentioned before, I think, or as I mentioned in our budget meeting, that the added specialist is, the value that brings and what that could do for helping the students that may not be on an IEP but still need that assistance. Like, we hear that and, are supportive of that. And, if the constraints weren't so hard, we'd be trying to find a way to be supportive of that financially too. It's hard to see how we're going to be able to fit that in currently with the numbers that are on the table.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Just of, this might be more for Rob or someone on the school committee. If one or two of those students who would use this added counselor and aren't on an IEP end up saying, okay, fine, I'm going to go in and try and get an IEP now, what would that do to our budget? If we had to then provide services to more students on an IEP as opposed to getting this other counselor.
Well, it's
And
not a-
Tony Barletta, this is Greg Panessa, member of the board.
It's really not another counselor, Greg, the counselor who's in place right now, Riley Edmonds, is a 1.0 full-time counselor, one individual. And it just happens that a portion of her salary is left over and funded by,
He's asking about the specialist.
I'm asking about the math ELA interventionist. The way I interpreted trying to bring in that position was, you know, to assist kids who may be on the
how you.
border of an IEP, but not necessarily there. And I'm just wondering if this person weren't hired, could certain people say, okay, my kid needs an IEP now, and could that impact the budget in other ways?
I mean, they might put the request in it, but the child would have to be fully evaluated by the required standards and qualify for receiving special ed services, and that's not a line that can be easily manipulated.
Okay.
The kid either has the learning disabilities that allow them to be required for it, or they don't, and the regular education child might not have a specific learning disability. It could be all kinds of other variables that lead to their lack of engagement with the material, or their learning style that isn't reflected in a special education expenditure that leaves them with no support services in a class of 20 or 21 kids, that the teacher has to handle all those kids, and maybe there's an ESP there, but not a lot of outside of the classroom support or help that would be, in my mind, for a kid like me, let's say when I was trying to learn math, if I'd had that extra ability to somebody to show me in just a different way to think about an equation and maybe get me excited about it, where the regular full-scale operation wasn't doing that, I might be able to get it and engage in it and not get further and further behind, especially in a topic like math, that the minute you get behind, you lose
Struggle to catch up.
Yeah.
the way in the headlights, because you can't catch up. I mean, other subject areas, you could have gaps in it and probably jump in at any time, but something like math is so progressive that I don't think we automatically would have more cost exposure because more kids would qualify in special education, maybe requiring us to hire another sped teacher. I think the numbers would stay about the same. There's a certain population of kids that are just a little further behind the others, that with that extra boost, that's what a specialist does. And that's why the majority of school systems have those positions. They usually have a separate math specialist and a separate English language specialist. They have a reading specialist. They have a writing specialist. And we're a very small district. So we have to.
May I piggyback off his question?
Of course.
If we did not hire someone in that type of position, do you see that we could have an uptick in transfers to, say, charter, where they would receive those services, and how would that impact our budget?
Possibly. I mean, there's so many other variables that cause a family to look at maybe a different educational environment. It wouldn't be helpful in terms of if those services were available in a charter school, another school system, that might, for me as a parent, convince me, well, that's the difference, you know, between the two. But I guess what I'd ask Tony is, if this was by necessity, because of the state of the reality of the overall budget, delayed for a year, not ideal, are the prospects any better, looking in your crystal ball at what a subsequent year or two might look like? Are we gonna get out of this tough stage we're in, or are we sentenced to it for kids' lifetime in the Johnson Elementary School?
I think it's hard to give a short answer to that question. You know, I do think that there are, with the sale, one thing that I think about right away is the sale of the Coast Guard housing lots. should generate new growth in the future. We're not gonna see it this year. We can hope that we're gonna see it next year, but really it's dependent on when those properties actually are constructed or developed. So, once that new growth comes in, you'll have an initial year of an increase in revenues above the 2.5%. Then you're right back to the 2.5% increase year after year based off that new number. So I do think that on the revenue side, as soon as possibly next fiscal year, not the one upcoming, but the one after, we could see, an increase on the unrestricted revenues.
Are there some costs coming off the book, like the school debt on the building, is that
School,
retired at a certain point that doesn't create free cash, but at least takes an obligation and allows it to be redirected?
yeah, school debt comes off of, I believe it was a 10-year debt exclusion override. It comes off of the books next year. We're still kind of looking at how that is gonna affect the operating budget, though. That will present some relief to an individual's tax bill. But how it's gonna, what the direct impact will be on the operating budget, still have to, analyze that. But we're constantly looking at other revenue streams. We're looking at other ways to try to reduce expenses. So, that's the name of the game, is to try to, improve in the future.
Tony, typically does the governor's budget come in on point or a little bit higher, a little bit lower than what you budget? Is there any trend there?
It's different every year, especially recently with the change from Governor Baker to Governor Healy, and last year being one of, I think her first budget.
It was.
So how the legislature responds to that, in the first year versus second year, you never know. They usually, I think we have an estimated amount at, it's either 2 or 3%. And I think we feel pretty comfortable with that, barring some, drastic change during the process.
Are there any other grants that we can apply for that could subsidize some of this that we're just not utilizing? Because our goal is to essentially try to keep as many kids in our school system as possible. And we've noticed an uptick in trend of kids leaving our school and going to charter or to other schools in 4th, 5th, and 6th. So are there other options that we're just not tapping into or not aware of that we can try to utilize or subsidize some of this cost?
And I guess that's where my question was coming from, is the $70,000 a year this year, which I understand is a lot and is over, but is that going to save us 150 next year? Something like that, where, there's going to be other costs coming from either students leaving or from, other programs that we'd have to pay for. So that was the only reason I asked my question.
I have a piggyback on this as well, when you're ready.
All right, well, so to answer Mariana's question first, there are grants out there, but grants aren't really a sound way to offset operational expenses. There are grants out there that might allow you to hire a teacher or a specialist or a counselor, for example, that will fund a salary at a high percentage in year one and slowly reduce it over a time period, and then eventually you absorb those costs. On expenses in the operational budget, that grants can help reduce are things that we've really, tried to utilize is like green community grants to, convert to high efficiency in lighting or insulation, things like that, to help reduce the cost of utilities, which we've found, plus the environmental benefits, obviously, but since we're talking finances, we've utilized that a lot here in the school, actually. We've also, in the past, we've talked about a larger scale solar project. We've run into some hurdles there with National Grid and their substations, so we're trying to find ways to break through that wall, because that could present a significant savings on operational expenses in future years. So there are grants out there, Mariana, that we can tap into for, particular projects that'll help offset operational expenses that aren't really salaries or insurances and benefits.
Okay.
And to the other I don't know, I think I'm not really an expert on, what the potential pro or negative financial impact would be of, not hiring the additional specialist or hiring it. That's, really more for you guys.
I want to spitball it out a little bit with you here. So I feel like we've got to protect this school, this tiny school, at all costs, because I'm not understanding the burden on the town too, because, you have the right to say, where do we come up with that money, right? I get that. I am very worried about the existential threats that Nahant faces through what's happening in the school right now, right? Around the school. So first of all, part of our work for the teachers is because we love and care about teachers, right? But it's also strategic, because we know that increasingly in Massachusetts, you can't afford to buy homes, right? And our teachers, if absent other money, a single teacher on their own cannot afford to buy a home in Nahant, which means we've got to compete for teachers in other ways. That is why Patty and Rob had the foresight of putting in being able to bring your kids in, right? And we wanted to even talk about that. Because we've got to find ways to compete, because they can easily go to Marblehead, Beverly, etc. And I don't know about living in Marblehead, but certainly you can find more affordable houses in Beverly than you can here in Nahant. So that's one threat. Second threat is a loss of the after-school program this year is enormous on a growing amount of families, and that will become larger as people need to go back to work and those kids age, right? My wife and I felt this acutely in Nahant, and it drove people to apply to the Marblehead Charter. It makes people feel like Nahant does not care about working families, that we act as if everybody can afford a $3 million home and live here and not worry about what their kids are doing, right? Or have lots of options for what their kids are doing. Later, Mr. Andrews is going to talk to the school committee about this study. This is okay to just mention briefly. We asked him to find out why students were leaving for the charter school. So we've lost a lot of revenue. In my son's class alone in the 5th grade, over the last few years, 7 boys, just the boys, 7 boys have left this school. Many to go to the charter school, not all. Out of the top 3, it's about the school day lengthening, the social content, because it's a bigger school, I assume, and teaching and learning. And many of those students had an IEP where they required additional support. So you see, like, for me, there's a lot of synergy in this position, the choices that we made at the table to support the teachers staying here in Nahant. Kevin has bent over backwards trying to figure out the after-school program, and we still need to figure that out. But the school, independent of this conversation with the town, the school is in a situation that is concerning. I mean, let's not forget that we sent an entire grade early to Swampscott Middle School, right? And that created quite a ruckus, and we still run into people on the street that say, you should send more kids, or please don't destroy the town by sending kids over there, right? Like that is a thing that is still alive here. And we take that really seriously, as do you, I know, right? So I think like where I said, I'm pretty worried, and knowing how much, also MCAS scores went down. NAEP scores across the country went down. We are further behind right now than we have been in 40 years in reading skills. Our math MCAS scores here in Nahant down last year. We definitely need this position. And I think it could shore up teachers trying their absolute best in a small school system to be able to serve every kid that comes in here, right? But if more kids are going down, that's more work for teachers to help bring them up. So we definitely need the support. So I think like, as we talk about this, we want to make sure that it's more than just can't really do another position if we have to absorb 20 grand from the counselor, worth every penny, and then another one, right? I get it, and we are gonna pay a cost on the other end, the more that this school is destabilized by financial concerns in and around us. And so I'm worried about that, like I said, and I'm looking at you because you had to do the bad guy budget thing, but it is all of our problem to figure this out, including the folks there.
Let me just talk about the MCAS scores briefly. We're down on math, 1% from the previous year. 11% higher than the state average. And then ELA, we were down 8% the previous year, but 13% higher than the previous average. So we're still higher than the state. I am not disappointed about the scores. I think that we are doing well. Always could do better, no doubt. And more support would help.
And what I'm trying to do is say, it's not to beat up, yes, it's better, I mean, we should do better than the state average when you consider all of the kids in Massachusetts together, including our urban communities that are really struggling, you know. Being an urban school superintendent myself, like, there is a big difference in terms of the supports in a suburban area versus an urban area in terms of schooling. And in terms of like, what the kids come in with, right, what they're exposed to, because of the way that oppression works, so it should be higher. And we want to pay attention to the fact that the math didn't helm that like the ELA did last year. It's not to beat up on the school. The school is great and it's doing everything it can, but let's not erode let's not take away something that I think we need, right? That's what I'm saying. And independent of everything going on in the school, there are existential threats to the school that we have to solve for in the budget. That's all. Sorry if it sounded a little too.
Not at all. No. And
Tony, can I ask you
Appreciate,
about overrides and not necessarily philosophy, but the history of overrides in Nahant? Maybe it's non-existent, or the last override was X years ago, and what sort of financial environment in your mind creates the desire, need, requiring them to reach out for an override? Because I think most people realize, especially in the school window, that 2.5% with 80% of your costs being personnel, a 2.5% world doesn't carry you over and over and over year after year after year, at least from a school person's point of view. I'm not saying it has to be a town administrator's point of view.
I mean, you know, those two comments back to back are unintentionally the larger picture of the challenge that we face.
Yeah.
It is becoming harder for people to afford to live in Nahant, right? And so while, you know, how can we bring in more revenues? Overrides an option, but you're now increasing that burden on the residents in town. So, you know, when over the last few years, we really prioritized out of town revenue streams and trying to find ways to bring that in. So we adopted local meals tax, which we get, you know, a decent amount of revenue from through a lot of like the catering that occurs with the function halls that are here. So when, you know, events are at those function halls, we get a little extra revenue coming into the town from, you know, it's not 100% out of town revenue, like out of town spending. People from out of town spending here in Nahant, but every other revenue stream is 100% in town. Right, you know, whether you look at fees or taxes, I mean, you can charge it in different ways, but it's still coming out of the resident's bank account. So we've tried to find other, you know, by utilizing grants, we've secured millions of dollars of grants, probably more so than the town ever has, and transfer that into cost savings. But we did the local meals tax. We also did a hotels tax, which, you know, when we did that, short-term rentals, you know, were unregulated in town. And we were estimating around, you know, anywhere from $100,000 to $180,000 in new revenue, coming into the town out of that. And that was like almost predominantly, you know, people who don't live here, renting a home here in town to stay. You know, you're bringing in money from the outside world into Nahant accounts. But then, you know, the impact of what short-term rentals had on our community was, you know, an issue that the residents really wanted to take on. So it became, at a previous town meeting, that got restricted significantly. So that revenue stream is no longer at 100 to 180, where we got to back that down to more like, you know, $40,000 to $60,000. So that was one attempt. We tried to bring in some outside revenue in to try to help offset the burden on the local residents. But with that came, you know, a impact to the character of the town. So there's a balance in that one too. So we're constantly trying to find, you know, ways to bring in new revenues that don't add cost burden to the residents. And then constantly trying to find ways to reduce expenses without sacrificing the services we provide. And then meanwhile, we're also trying to build up our salaries so that we're competitive and can maintain the talented staff. So all these things kind of put pressure on each other. It's not an easy puzzle. But you know, I think you have to really exhaust those avenues first before you go to the residents looking for an override, you know, and I'm telling you, you know, like I said at the beginning, when you look at the budgets, you know, even salaries aside, if you just look at expenses in your operational budgets, there's not a lot there to trim any further. So, and staffing wise, as you spoke to, you know, the school is minimally staffed. Our fire department, our police department, minimally staffed. We have 2 full-time firemen working on a shift, showing up to, you know, medical or fire calls. It's, you know, that's an extreme concern for us. We have, there's hours during every day where you have only 1 officer on the road and 1 officer in, you know, at the dispatch desk. Another extreme concern, you know, so we have the town hall's minimally staffed, right? You have, you know, basically 1 or 2 people in every department managing the everyday workings of, you know, making the town work. So, you know, I think it's just important to paint the picture that everybody's doing as much as they possibly can with as little, you know, as thin of resources that you really can get. And meanwhile, you know, you look at a similar job in another town and you know, the salary is significantly more. So it's tough. It's tough. So I guess the long story short, I think you just got to keep pushing at finding ways to bring in new revenues, and try to reduce expenses, you know, as much as possible. I wish, unfortunately, we don't have like the luxury of a commercial tax base. There's not, you, being an island community, that really, like, unless you have a commercial business that is has destination value, like it's worth driving there for a particular thing that you're selling. No one's just driving by and saying, oh, I'm hungry, let me get a sandwich, like you have to come into Nahant for a reason. So we don't have that commercial aspect that many other towns have the luxury of having. So it's challenging. It's a tough way. It's a tough challenge, but we've, all that being said, the way that we've done our budgets over the last 5 years or 6 years or so, we've, been able to make incremental improvements on the salary stuff. We've, and then while also, investing in things that matter to our bond rating, which is like the town's credit score. So when we have to borrow for investments that, for whatever reason, we're saving money there on interest rates and things like that. So financially, we're doing well with what we have. But it's tight. It's tight every year.
So where does this leave us? Where, like, I think because this is the first time we've had a conversation like this at this table, where does it go from here? Are you saying we don't have enough money for this budget and you're sending the budget back? Who makes this decision?
So, I think so next step is really we've just completed all of our department head meetings, reviewing all their budget requests.
Okay.
Next step is for Allison and I to kind of get, start sharpening the pencils and find ways to balance the budget. Then we submit that proposal to the selectmen vote on the budget. And then we send that budget to the finance committee. The finance committee, typically will use the Board of Selectmen budget as their basis, but what you vote on at town meeting is the finance committee's budget.
Right.
So
Okay.
ultimately, what is voted on at town meeting is the finance committee's budget. I think that the way I've spoke with other department heads is, I'm giving this presentation to, bring everybody into the larger conversation of a big picture perspective. I'm not doing it to say, adjust your needs or requests, come to us with less or something like that. I think you still have to advocate for what you think is right for the school. I think you think what you're advocating for has a lot of value to it and a lot of good points. My job is to deliver a balanced budget. And unfortunately, like looking at the numbers as they are now, I think it's gonna be really hard to meet, all of your needs and requests, because it really leaves us nothing to deal with everything else that the town has in front of it. So that's just kind of the reality. But I still think, you should advocate for what you feel is right. I think it comes down to, presenting a solution or of a balanced budget to the finance committee and then going to town meeting to get it approved. But it'd be, you'd have to take from somewhere else in order to, make the dream work, at like the version 2, it was what I referred to. The way I see it right now, it's just really, really hard to make it all work.
what point do you consider an override collectively? And I really feel your pain and Allison's pain in trying to balance this budget. And I'm not suggesting that that's the answer either.
I wouldn't do it, I wouldn't consider it before, you know, the new growth of the Coast Guard housing comes in and we have a real, like, we have a good number on that. And then you can better forecast the finances from there. But, you know, I expect that in the coming years, it's gonna have to be considered, because I look at, you know, I know what, you know, the dangers and the struggles that our fire department and our police department are having. I know what the school is dealing with, and those are all things that I believe we need to solve in the future. We need to find ways to do better in those areas. And really, the only way to do that, it would be to look at some sort of override. But the challenge is, you know, keeping affordability of living in Nahant at a certain level too. So you have to find a way, again, you really want to exhaust all those other options first. So that if you have to go to the residents to ask for more in tax revenue, it's as little as you possibly need to ask for.
I'm gonna re-raise like one point, which is if people are considering moving into Nahant and they take a look at the fallout of our enrollment in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, and they look at the affordability factor of the houses here, it just, that is also a threat to everybody. I mean, certainly not having enough, you know, police or fire presence for what we might need is also a threat. I'm not missing that. But this is also a threat, right? And it might be less obvious, you know, but like you've got to be able to stem the tide, and part of this budget is to try to do that, right? Because if we could take our already really good teachers, right, who have evolved, right, over the last 3 years, has been a big evolution of teachers. So now we've got all these teachers that, and many of whom are young, that are like excited and making it work and really invested. And if positions like this will help fortify them, the whole thing gets better. Like, it is a critical part of the web of success that Rob and Kevin are putting together here, you know, with a lot of support. I feel very excited about where the school is going, but it definitely needs the investment to get there, right? Like, this is not an extraneous position. There are extraneous positions in school. We just came up with ESSER funds where people are like, overhire, right? And now we're sort of paying for that. But this isn't an overhire. This is here is a place where kids are gonna get better. Kids get better, the whole gets better. And while I can't say that there's singularity, hire this, nobody's gonna leave the fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, all these movements of supporting the teachers and supporting the schools and seeing kids with, that are behind catch up and stay, that will make a family want to stay, you know, want to make that work as you figure out, you know, Coast Guard funding, or sales and revenue in other places, you know. I want that to stay on the table when you talk to the finance committee and other Allison, who I don't know, and other folks.
Just one more quick question, as it relates to the Coast Guard housing, just so I have an idea timing wise, Tony. Is it that we need to wait for those properties to be developed and then for the property tax revenue to start being generated from those houses that are going to be put up?
Right.
Is that,
Yeah, so as they sell, we can estimate some new growth in land value, but it's minimal.
until they put up a house, right?
Right, that's when you really see an impact.
But that could be 2 or 3 years for all we know. I mean, that's completely dependent on the buyers. That has nothing to do with the town or anything like that. So those properties could sit there vacant if building materials skyrocket and people say, I'm not building this house right now.
Right, and that's why I was kind of hesitant to putting a time frame on it. But yeah, you got it right. That's exactly right. It's really dependent on when they get built.
Okay. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tony.
sorry to be, I feel like,
No, you're doing your job, we're doing our job.
I really appreciate
yesterday's
your honesty
leftovers.
Yeah.
and the transparency. So thank you. And thank you for.
I guess just to buddy up with what Beth is saying, you know, it seems like the movement into town is by a lot of young families, and obviously schools are a key focal point for those people. So I just hope that it's not lost on the other town residents who may not have kids in school, that although these improvements may benefit the students and the parents of those students more directly, everyone in town benefits if we have a stronger school system. Makes property values higher. Then when they sell their property because they want to get out of this place that's too expensive, they've got more to go do that with. So I just hope that that's not lost on the general population of the town, that everyone benefits from this.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely not lost on me. I think that like in my conversations with residents, and especially, when we went through like the housing production plan recently, a lot of the feedback we had during that process was, even those who don't have kids in the school system, like they don't want Nahant to turn into a retirement community. They enjoy, having young families coming in and, having a healthy school system is going to help do that. So, education's a core pillar of the health of our community. So it's definitely not lost on me. I completely hear you. I don't disagree. I just offering I guess the bigger, the overall picture perspective of it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you.
You're more than welcome to stay if you so desire.
Kevin's real important, I imagine. So.
No.
No, I'll head home and try and see the kids before they go to sleep. But I appreciate the opportunity to come. It is the first time I think that, usually, I don't know if I've been to a school committee meeting to kind of talk at this point during the budget process of the bigger picture. So I think that, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I think it would be good for us to do that in the future too.
Agree. And we thank you for your insight.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
So we just wrapped up the discussion.
Oh, yeah, other,
Of the proposed, school budget, item 11.
and now we're going back,
And so it's a really good question.
Yeah.
Um,
because I assume you open then, because I was 6 minutes
Yes,
late.
so I moved the order. I moved 11 further up on this, but tonight, do we have to vote on a bridge?
With budget timeline sheet I handed out to you as well.
Good, I'm glad, because I personally need a little bit more
Tonight was
time.
simply for budget deliberation, which I think we did a good job with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Tony's already been sent the superintendent's two versions of the budget.
Yes.
I think the only thing you could possibly decide tonight is whether to keep those two versions moving forward for them to have to sort of work two scenarios, or whether you only adhere to version one without the math and ELL specialists to move forward at this point. The 28th is a budget review and any other adjustments that might have to be there. The 11th, you have a public hearing on either two versions or one version. I guess you're still just a school committee public hearing on their superintendent's proposed budget. On the 25th, you have more budget deliberations, and the school committee then approves a final budget to send to the finance committee. At that point, it's the school committee's budget. It's no longer the superintendent's budget. So the 25th is when you actually move a number forward. And then there's a meeting with the finance committee, to present that approved budget, and then some placeholder dates. So really, right now was for being able to see version 2, solidify the numbers, hearing from Tony, and you could choose to just stay where you're at until the next meeting, or to reflect what you heard tonight about the prospects of version 2 being able to go forward, and possibly taking that off the tape. But you're not forced to do that at this time. It's just you're then requiring everyone at the town level who deals with that budget to look at it through 2 lenses, with a math and ELL specialist or without one. So it depends on where that critical point is at which you've got to make that decision. It's doubtful that you're going to find a whole bunch of money on your own, that you're going to be able to massage other lines. Those other lines have already been adjusted. You've got a negotiated agreement with the teachers. You, I would assume by that time, will have a negotiated agreement with the ESPs. And then you have all the collateral salaries that relate, whether they be a principal, custodians, secretaries, that have numbers built into it. Those are taken care of in that first version and the second version. But, you know, like Tony said, if there's only 300 or so thousand of increased resources available for already tight budgets, and version 2 asks for that and then some.
They have
Version
no-
2
no money
has
for 'em.
a difficult road ahead of it. Doesn't mean you have to abandon them. Version 1 has not an easy road ahead of it. It's 246 of the 300 and change that's available for the entire town.
But we don't know what the budget, the governor's budget is gonna come in with, and then.
Exactly.
And then I also, like, just from my own budget processes, we don't, I absolutely feel like he's trying the best intentions, he's being transparent, and his. There may be other things he's trying to figure out, right? Because this is all to go into he and Allison coming up with some proposals.
Right.
For the finance committee, so I
Right.
think he would be unwise to not come to do something have a conservative talk with us with such an increase. I also wonder about the free cash last year was at 1.7, this year 800 projected. Is it was 1.7 and then we spent some, and now it's 800, it's not 1.7 plus the 800 from this year,
Right,
it's
yeah.
total 800. Okay.
But that's the available amount
Of
they
free
have
cash.
as it relates. But last year's available amount was to spend on one-time expenditures, because you can't use it to fund
Exactly.
multiple
Right,
years.
right.
So, and we're not presenting any extra free cash as has happened in the past from our budget. We're bailing ourselves out of a situation that has the same special ed
Yeah,
factors occurring in this school year that have to be filled and taken care of using some of the revolving accounts, possibly hoping that some other lines that are budgeted don't fully expend, and using circuit breaker for that. It's a delicate balance, but we're not gonna come out and be turning back in $100,000. Last year, they basically gave back 89,000 or whatever it was. 2 or 3 years before that, it was 50 or 200 or whatever. And that was during the time of COVID and
COVID,
grants.
Yeah.
Those days are done.
Gone.
So that free cash number this year had our 89,000 in it of the 800. I assume that's where that goes. It must go to free cash.
It does.
And that's not gonna be this year. So that I would assume next year's free cash amount is even lower than the 800, because all budgets are tight. They're not having a lot of lines. They're gonna have a lot of leftover money in them.
But I guess that makes me ask, okay, year after year, Tony prided himself on giving money back to the town, and now we're asking for some, and where has that gotten us? I mean, Tony always said, you got to give money back, you got to give money back, because then when you need it, it'll be there. Well, we need it.
I mean,
So,
we need it, Greg, just to do version 1, because version 1 is
no doubt.
1,000 more than what the
Right.
last 2 large asks and funds were from the town. The year before that was $111,000 increase in the school budget, two something percent. We've
But
got-
not for nothing, most of what I'm seeing here is town, right, in town expenses going up, not Johnson's school. Like, so that's something that the whole town has to deal with, not just the Johnson school.
Yep.
They're town expenses. You live in town. So you got to deal with it. I mean, I guess my thing is the 2 versions, it's one line item that makes them different. So to say that people have to look at them through 2 different lenses, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Rob, but it's like, it's pretty simple to say, all right, this is all due to one line item. It's not like you got to look at 12 line items to say, well, can we tweak this or tweak that? So if it were up to me, I would say push forward on the 2 versions, because it's not that much more mental energy for people to look at them and figure out where's the difference coming from. It's one
And
cost.
The real driver of the increase is in 2 lines that are not controllable, that are mandatory
Yeah.
lines for kids with special needs. And they're large increases. And if those numbers were about the same change rate they were from 2 years ago to last year, which is not a big change in tuitions and transportations. This year is unique. I think we'd be able to easily fund version 2, with that specialist in there. I think my own opinion is you hold on to it as long as you can until it reaches a point that it's just causing a lot of dissonance between, moving things forward. It certainly doesn't have to be decided tonight that version 2 is off the table.
I definitely don't.
Yeah, I think we should hold it and not make a decision on it yet.
I think you hold on to it just as long as you can,
Mhm.
but
Because I also heard that if we say, okay, not this year, there is absolutely no guarantee that next year it's going to be any different.
100%.
I mean, to depend on those Coast Guard houses, I've only been in town since 2019, but it sounds like that's been an issue that's been going on for longer than that. So to say that these houses are gonna get built like that and be pumping out a bunch of real estate tax revenue by next fiscal year, I mean, I was in construction. I don't know if anyone else has been, but that's just not how these things typically go in my experience.
Yeah, but what price point are they gonna be? Are they gonna be affordable? I don't know what's happening with them. Does it?
Well, the lots are actually not.
The lots are affordable.
I mean, but it's building on the lot. Like when you.
Yeah.
Count the cost of the land and then what it's gonna cost to build on the house, it's pricey.
I mean, but between us, we probably want them to be the least affordable possible and to be the biggest houses that they can be to create the most tax revenue if we want money for the school.
Yeah, not if we can't sell them, school age kids. I watch my sister-in-law would love to live in Nahant. She's a teacher in Peabody and has actually done the after-school program or the summer program here. She can't afford it. She can afford like a $650,000 home, which is no bad thing, and she can't find a home here.
No, you can't. The average price of a home, I was on the Nahant, housing subcommittee, is $950,000.
Yeah.
So.
I think you've done exactly what tonight's agenda item was about, was deliberating. You had the fortunate ability to hear from the town administrator live about the situation. And now it's time to reflect between now and the next meeting as to where you want to go. We're not gonna find a whole bunch of other revenues between now and then. And you could have another special ed student identify that needs an out-of-district placement or a change, and all of a sudden, those are not $5,000 and $10,000 adjustments. They're 40 and 50 and 60 up to $100,000 changes. So right now, you're not at the fail-safe point.
It also means that we need to hang on to every single bit that we can.
And I think it's the right position, for the right reasons, that will have a great effect on a lot of kids.
So we'll keep pushing. That's our job.
Great. So let us move back to item number 4, which is correspondence and community inputs. Has anyone received correspondence or input from the community that they wish to share?
I have actually, and I don't know if it's been addressed at a previous meeting that I missed, so I apologize. But the large community feedback I've received is with the enrichment program that are being offered, that people who were in the after school program should have priority in the spots that were allotted for the enrichment programs, since they were the ones who lost out greatly. And that was like the only feedback I've gotten recently. That was like their big ask.
I'm gonna defer to you, Kevin, in terms of lots for the enrichment programs and where we are, if you know off the top of your head.
Certainly, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer that, the question, from you. We have not had to turn away students because programs were closed. We had, I believe on Monday that they were to be closed, we had 2 programs that were full. But we've been able to accommodate anybody that's needed them. We haven't had programs for every day of the week for every age group. So that might be, and I did receive one email from a parent who has a student in the after school program who asked to be considered as a priority. And I believe that there might have been, the program runs Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I believe there's one day of the week where there's not a program for a certain age group.
Tuesday, I think, right?
Okay, I'm not
For the
sure.
upper grade.
Right, Tuesday, the upper
For
grade.
the 5th and 6th grade. there is
Yeah,
actually-
and there's a conflict where there's 2 programs for younger students. It wasn't designed as a replacement for the after-school program. But I believe we were able to accommodate all the requests.
Will there be a spring enrichment cycle, do you think, Mr. Andrews?
Through you, Madam Chair, the intention is to have a second 8-week session.
Great.
Pending teacher participation, and we had good participation. We did ask if there were any parents that would like to teach a class and be compensated. We didn't get any. So it's all run by teachers and myself and our counselor. Where it was once a PTO program. We used to have an enrichment block where we bring karate in, we'd offer art. Some of the programs we run by teachers, some by parents. And the teachers stepped up and really took it on. And I'm happy with how it looks. We have 72 students enrolled.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
It's great.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a godsend, Mariana, for what for the reasons you just said, as a person who also was just missing the after-school program.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, I signed up for it every day. So that's been nice, yeah.
And I have an update on both of the programs.
Actually, I think this is, I know I'm way out of order, but that would be a great cue to talk about those programs.
Fantastic. Well, I'm happy to. We do have, many programs running. We have art at 2 different grade levels. Spanish had a very high enrollment in the older students at the last minute. And so we changed our offering to add a Monday program for Spanish for 5th and 6th graders. So Julie Weber's teaching that. I'm running a Lego Technic program on Thursdays with our custodian. And we're using a wonderful curriculum that I got at a yard sale that is full and has excellent gears and pieces. So it runs until, the program runs until 3:30. I supervise snack with Riley Edmonds Monday through Thursday for 15 minutes while the teachers get the classrooms ready. 2:30 to 3:30, the classes run with 2 teachers, which is needed. It's a higher ratio than the school day, but it really isn't a school day offering. It's a much different animal if you ever worked in an after-school program. Students are more excited, multi-age, you're doing things, and they think they're half in playtime, half in school time. And so with that, you really need to have the skilled staff on hand if you want them to be doing and working and learning and having fun. And so our classes are 14 to 20 students, depending on the class. We've got yoga on Thursdays. We have art on Wednesdays and Mondays. We have Spanish on Tuesdays and Mondays. And as I mentioned, the Lego Technics is on Thursdays. And so there's a lot of opportunities, I think. Again, it can't replace, and it doesn't replace an aftercare program. And I can speak about that as well. I think it's fantastic. I think it, matches what is done at the charter school, and that was what our previous goal was to offer after-school enrichment programs. Because they have that until 3:15, at no cost, I'll say. Parents are paying $50 per 8-week session. All the parents and we offer full scholarship. All the parents that I've spoken with feel that it's a wonderful price point, and it doesn't cover the full cost. The school is picking up some of the cost. But to get teachers offering something that's of value, I think we need to, pay them accordingly.
What's the stipend for the teachers?
Teachers are at the contractual rate, which is $38.70 an hour. And they're also, if they're preparing for the class, which most of them are, they're getting a half an hour. So you think about the cleanup and the setup time, and then an hour contact time. It's really reasonable. It's 15 minutes ahead, 15 minutes at the end. Any other industries, getting 60 to 100 in that kind of skill set. So I think it's fair, and I appreciate the teachers that have stepped forward. We had all the teachers that offered to take a position, and it's not as if, folks are banging down the doors to say, I want to work an extra hour after school. So I appreciate them joining in, and most of them express that they're doing it for the kids, they really are. And families.
I love that. I deeply appreciate it.
Me too.
Are there any other enrichment classes that you think we could offer in the spring?
Yep, there's one that's funded by a grant that I wrote, which is weaving with native plants. So dyeing, I mentioned this last time. We have Girls on the Run starting. That's a new program that's coming. Senator Crichton has a grant for this program, and so Katie pastors step forward. This is a 2-day-a-week program to build girls' self-esteem, offer fitness, and also compete. And so we're going to be taking part in putting a team together in the spring. And then, as I said, we'll have another 8-week session. And of course, band's continuing on Thursdays. Yeah, I think we have a nice offering of programs after school. And I'll look to see if we can get karate back That was popular.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and maybe the Spanish will improve, I mean, increase in numbers because it got really popular shortly. Yeah,
Well, thank you so much.
sure thing.
It's really
Sure thing.
appreciated. Does anyone else have any community correspondence? Or is there anyone that is out in the community that would like to speak? Don't see. any.
Check to see if there's any hand raised, or I'm sure they could just speak up, but. Nope, I don't see any hands.
Okay. Well, we will do the authorization for the payment of bills, which we do need to sign off on at the end of this meeting.
There are no unusual requests. The total amount, the $187,547.52.
Do I have a motion?
I have a motion to approve the bill roll at the amount of $187,547.52.
I second.
I have a second and a third. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moving on to the superintendent's report.
Mine's relatively short. I had the pleasure, was it last Friday or Thursday night of attending the winter concert that Mr. Bullock put on. Mr. Andrews was there, good crowd. I was really impressed with the number of kids involved for a small school. Their enthusiasm. So kudos to Mr. Bullock and to Mr. Andrews for sort of shepherding that program forward. It's a really important program. The kids seem to have a lot of fun. The minibus is now property of the town of Nahant. We own it. It's sitting at the DPW parking lot in Rockport, waiting for the mechanic to do the last couple of things on it. And because of the impending snowstorm, he said, I can't see it till next week. This is now next week. So he's going to do his work, and then stenciling occurs to it so that it has its own hometown feel, including the Blue Lobster that Mary Delicio won the contest for the new mascot for the school. Will be right on the top part of that bus. Again, it's a 14-passenger bus driven by a member of the staff with a regular license. So it can be used for all kinds of different short trips around. So we were able to use one of the revolving accounts to be able to buy that, and be nice once that's here. We'll get the paper to come over and do a nice shot on it. And that's impressive. The greenhouse has hit a little bit of a stone wall. The funding from the garden club, they loved the project, but just do not have a lot of available extra funds to apply to it. PTO, I met with them. They were still looking at what available funds they had and what the garden club might put on the table. So I've gone back to the foundation to see whether there's any higher percentage of funding, all the way to full funding. And I didn't get a immediate, no, what are you crazy response. So we're 2 days into, hey, could you fund the whole thing? So I'm eternally hopeful that maybe they'll say, yeah, for a smaller scale, we'll back this project, but I haven't given up completely. I think it would be a worthwhile project. I think it would be something that kids really like to take part in and would be unique to the Johnson School and applicable to what its mission is. But we'll just have to see.
Oh, don't give up on it.
Well, I'll never give up on it. It's just I've lost any of the easier routes to be able to parcel together the matching funds that would be necessary to go with the foundation grant, because initially they were not able to, or their practices went to fund the entire amount. They're there to look for projects where they have a large stake in it, but that the community itself has other input into that project. I'm still hopeful. We'll see where that goes. I'm not giving up on it.
And what amount are you looking
Well,
for?
we started with a little over 100,000,
Mhm.
And when the CPC committee, who we were asking 40,000 at one point, said, well, it doesn't qualify for our standards.
Right.
It's a structure where recreation occurs inside of it, but it's that CPC fundings couldn't apply to the structure. And since it's a public school, the CPC doesn't like to fund entities that have other funding streams like public schools through the tax base. It's supposed to be sort of one-offs. There's no historical nature to the greenhouse, which is where CPC really came from. That came off the table, and then that left very few options with regard to it. So we downsized it. We went from an all-glass structure, which was fairly big footprint to it. It's now down to smaller footprints and into polycarbonate walls and roof. Still turnkey cost, even putting it up yourself would be about 80,000. So the last word from the foundation, which they did not voice a no to, was to go from funding a third of the amount to funding 2/3 of the amount. They just wanted to hear back, were you successful with the garden club? Were you successful with your other requests? So my email earlier in the week was trying to hit a wall here. I understand this is a bold request, but any chance you could fund at 100% level? And part of my negotiating skills says, well, you'd think you'd have an instant, but you're crazy. Have a nice day. And instead, I had no answer yet, and that makes me hopeful. But we'll see. It's sort of driving me to make that happen, and I don't lose easily, so we'll see how that goes. But we'll never give up on it. There are other foundations or other streams that will come in at some point. I don't think the foundation we connected with would ever take their offer off the table completely, but it's disappointing. We'll just carry on. A lot of disappointments in life. We're certainly not dealing with what they're dealing with in California right now. So trying to build a greenhouse as opposed to trying to put back entire neighborhoods, put it all in perspective. And I should be at peace with the fact that we even have, interest from the foundation initially to make this happen. So it's all relative with regard to that. And the only other thing I had is preschool screening occurred today, which is a wonderful thing for incoming students to the school. I don't know how many kids were involved today, but
I would say about 12 parents signed up for that. That was for students that are enrolled in the school, and students that are presently, out there in the wild, as we say. So it was open to all as part of Child Find, which is part of the, special education process.
Great, thank you for the report. And do you have anything else to add to yours?
I sure do, Madam Chair, thank you for that. We are taking part in a public oration this weekend called Yes for Nahant. This is the 50th anniversary of the Historical Society's founding under Calantha Sears, who's passed recently at 103. And so we've been meeting with Julie Tarmy, the executive director. And so I've embraced this, as I always do with all things Nahant. It's fun to really get the students involved with things that are outside their school. So there's a poem that the students have been learning on Thursday morning at 8:10. The whole school is going to recite it together. And they've also been illustrating the poem. So I've made these pages where they can pick a couple lines. This one says, Nahant is an island with chiming bells, a green gem and blue seas. And they would illustrate this. Each grade level is going to have a winner. And that winner will get, of course, a Lego minifig mystery pack as a fun item. And the art's going to be shared at the town hall, which will be at 2 o'clock on Sunday. And so I'd encourage anybody in the audience to attend. Students are encouraged to attend with their family or alone. There's going to be singing, music, and food as well. 2 o'clock on Sunday, and at our school, we'll do a full school assembly to practice the poem together and share the artwork and see who won.
So it's 2 o'clock Sunday at here?
At Town Hall. At Town Hall, yeah, it's such a beautiful place. We really found that at the concert. It's, I mean, of course, you all know the hall, but it's nice to go into a unique space, kind of almost a religious experience going into this wood line, big windows. I'm glad that Ms. Harmy reached out to us. It's a kickoff for their 50th anniversary, so there'll be events all year. I expect that we'll be taking part in. And that's just the first. I want to let you know that Northeastern's returning. They're coming back. They're coming to the school on these dates that I have here. Each class will have a 45-minute class at the school, February 6th, 7th, and 13th. They're also going to come back in May for a school-wide celebration of the Earth. So that's a little teaser for you all. I'll let you know more about that when we get closer. But we are continuing to work with Northeastern University, and I look forward to being able to use the bus to get out there and see tide pools and the bunkers, which are really a special part of the history of Nahant.
Well, that's really neat.
And then I just want to let you know that the MCAS calendar is on the public calendar now. I'm working with our new tech support, Peter Ton, who's fantastic. And he's been a great support for getting MCAS up and running, but that calendar is out there. Doesn't start until late March. So I'll share those dates with you when I have them all written out. But if any parents are concerned, it's on the calendar, starts in late March and ends in the middle of May this year. And then finally, on the after-school program, I did reach out to a new program that has after-school programming. They haven't gotten back to me yet. I'm also looking at what we can do as a school to perhaps encourage any participant to stay for longer and kind of defray the costs of the students that are there that used to be there until 5:30, looking at how we can find a midpoint.
Yep.
Between 4:15 and 5:30. Maybe we can all stay to 4:30, that accommodate everybody. Maybe lower the salaries amount that we have to pay for our payroll. Because we still need to, the challenge we have really, I think, is to get people either to come out to Nahant to work, or if you're already in Nahant,
Yeah.
to stay longer with kids. And so that's the intersection I'm trying to find, is between the tuition and the compensation. The Y was starting out at $15 an hour. They got nobody. They tried $22 an hour. They really still got nobody. I tried 26, and we got some counselors, not 5 days. And so the real challenge is getting enough students that will pay what it takes to really take care of the kids for the time we want. And so I'm trying to maybe looking at shortening the length of the program to bring the total cost down for everybody. And then my next step is to do a survey, folks that need the care, find out what they need to make it practical.
I think that's great thinking. You
Yeah.
know, like, it's like, we can't do everything we want, so we'll see what we can do and see
Right.
what helps. I think
If we
it's
offer
great.
4:30 to everybody stays to 4:30,
Right.
pays to
That'd be
4:30.
huge for us.
It could take an hour off of labor
Yep,
and make it more reasonable.
thank you for doing that.
Sure, so that's my next step, and that's my report, Madam Chair.
Any personnel updates?
There aren't any. We're close to being able to fill the long-term substitute for a teacher's maternity leave that is scheduled to begin shortly after February break. Interviews occurred, offers been made. They have a couple other long-term positions to look at. But otherwise than that, I think we've updated you on all the other personnel hires
Yeah.
that have occurred so far.
Very good. Is there any old business that we want to discuss this evening?
In the old business, and there's also no new disposal of surplus property.
That's correct.
That's kind of left over from the last agenda. We may sort of keep it on there as no, nothing needed tonight, but that's why it's still on the list.
Okay. We've already discussed number 11, so moving on to future agenda items.
Yeah, the curriculum committee is actually starting its work already, so I'm not sure until we start meeting and solidify exactly what we're doing, that we're gonna be able to propose what a cycle would look like. But the idea is to focus on certain key subject areas and develop the needs for it, and not try to do every subject area every year. And we're looking primarily right now at a math program focus. So that committee's just started. Kevin and I are on it. Gabby Rademacher and Kayla Harrington are the teacher reps. Been some problem with scheduling, but we're gonna meet very soon. I think we'll have a report on the progress on the math curriculum part as opposed to the entire cycle. So even though I've been carrying that as an agenda item, I think it probably drops off until it becomes clearer exactly what that committee will do. That second item, remember we were approached about Essex Tech representatives. There was a name out there. Can't remember whether it was you or Tony was supposed to contact the individual and see whether they were interested in continuing.
It was not me.
Yeah,
That
so
I
that
know.
we need to find out who that person is so that we can get them appointed. Because whoever it was, I think, is no longer serving that term. So. And we've been carrying that for a little while.
That came to us by Kristen, correct? She reached out
Yeah.
with the name of the individual.
School calendar we'll be bringing at the next meeting. It's pretty well fleshed out. A couple little questions that Kevin and I are gonna talk about, a couple of suggestions. It needs to go to the NTA for their sort of input into it. The draft, and we're pretty close to doing that. There may or may not be a preschool restructuring proposal, possibly changing how preschool is delivered, but we haven't had the chance to meet with preschool teachers to fully do that, but that's most likely a future agenda item, possibly.
Okay.
And those are the future agenda items. Otherwise than that, revisit budget. Again, to see whether we have any different thoughts in 2 weeks than we do right now. We'll
Okay,
see.
well, if there are no other items to discuss, could I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn the meeting on January 14th at 8:56 p.m.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi,
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
good night.
Love this.
You want to sign?
Where's the black pen?
Maroon one.
You can use the red pen if you want. I don't need a back there from.
Evan, you need Legos.
Oh, yes, I know.
Do you need Legos?
Oh, do I need Legos? Oh, no, you need to keep them for your grandkids.
My God.
I promise you. Alex will be happy when he gets to share them with his, yes.
I do have many Legos.
No, no, I'm telling you. You need to, that, he'll be very sad in 20 years when you've given them away.